It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of discipline to know what you want to do.
There's 3 ways people change. Number 1 is fear, the fear of losing something. Number 2 is pain. And the number 3 is choice. Beautiful thing about business owners and entrepreneurs that many people don't understand is we're there for each other.
100%.
What does that person want to see out of it?
They really want to see you succeed. They actually want to see you go forward. As long as you're doing what you're saying you're going to do and you're actually putting in the work to do it, they'll help you all the time. Change micro things and it will change your world. Think about it this way. What you've been doing for the past 5 years is what brought you to being here today. So if you never change that, it's always going to be the same. So I started looking at my surroundings. In the construction world, I was one of the youngest guys.
So today, me and Zeke, we're here today on the Young CEO podcast, another episode live here in DeKalb, Texas. And I'm just so glad to have you on, Zeke.
Thank you, man. It's an honor to be here.
And I still remember last year when you first came in and, really we didn't know each other. And now it's like, we talk every day. We go to church together. We have fun together. We literally do everything together. And it's such an amazing story that you came in and now you look where we are today.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought,
Yes, a year ago, was a whole different story.
Yeah, I know. And so today on our podcast, we're going to be talking about the importance of having scaffolding and mentors, coaches in your life, and what, the importance of having what I call wise counsel around us if something happens or if you need advice in life. I think what I've learned the most is people go through life and they have no idea if they have a problem that somebody's already been through that, has already fixed that problem, and probably already knows how to fix the problem. But for sure, us as men, we're so scared to ask for help. Can you talk about your past struggles of how important is it to ask for help, but then also how hard is it to ask for help?
Wow, that's a great question. Number 1, I'm Hispanic, so that's probably one of if there's a level to what do they call it? Being, what's the word?
Like high ego?
Yes, and not asking for help, right? Be prideful. That's the word. Be prideful on what you're doing and, I could do it by myself and all that kind of thing. It's just through the roof, right? Especially in our culture. But one of those things that I quickly understood coming up was you need help. You need help from wherever the source was. And at my point in time in life, I didn't even know that someone existed that wanted to help you. You know what I mean? Because you see, the only coaches I knew before was baseball coach, basketball coach, not life coach or anything like that.
You see football coaches in the field and they're doing, all kinds of different things. But we're going to be talking about 5 things today in the podcast. And number 1 is we're going to be talking about where you can start and also where me and you both started. The journey was a lot different for me and you. My journey was totally different, but it all ended together. So that's a unique thing. And then what areas are your weakest area, whether it's in business, life, marriage, whatever you're doing. We're going to talk about wise counsel, how to create the wise counsel around you. Number 4 would be what are you willing to give up in order to go to the next level. I think that's going to be big. And then number 5 is our last one, is how can you find your first mentor?
Wow.
And so when we jump into our first one, we're going to jump right in, is where you can start versus where we both started. So Zeke, I want to get back to you. I want to know, and I think our listeners should also want to know, how does a Hispanic working in construction since, I don't know how old you were, how do you go from, that to now being in the seat? Where did your personal growth journey start?
That's where it all started. Well, let me go back about 3 years ago. That's where our personal development started, right? But now let's go back to when I actually started the whole working journey, because that's what I call it. It was more of a working journey, live lessons and everything. I come from a very small town. It's a border town. We used to literally cross the border every single day to go to school. And there's a lot of big different cultures from here and there and everywhere, right? So for my first 2 or 3 years working, I thought that being someone successful was driving a nice car, was maybe starting your own business, but never thought about it like having everything at once, right? It was either the person was very successful, very rich, but never had a good life, or vice versa. That same mentality that everybody has. The rich is not happy, right? They have money, but they don't have the happiness. Well, I used to think, I'm like, I prefer being unhappy but having a lot of money and be able to do whatever you want to do, right? So I started working in the construction world, and you quickly find out that everybody has different wages. Mm-hmm. When it comes to wages, is the better you are at your work, the more money you make, right? So that's the perception I had about it. So I started looking and seeing how I can improve my skills in the construction industry. And my uncle was a foreman, so he was very tough. He's like, hey, the guy that makes the most money is the guy that knows how to read the blueprints, the one that knows how to move the job and this and that. So I started being around him at all times. And then we started going to projects, and then I started moving with the people. But then the culture, coming back to the culture is the biggest thing. I mean, when you're in the field with a bunch of guys in the construction field, like, it's the F word here and there, and there's hard jokes, and there's so many other things. And then I started paying attention to what was happening to society. I was like, I don't know, I want to try something different. So I went from construction to a call center, from a call center to working at a plasma center, and that was very cool. But then people that were coming in that were actually up the ladder were people with either very big educational degrees, which was college, 5, 6, 7 years of college, or they worked for the company for 10 years. And in my case, I was like, well, I didn't go to college, and I don't have 10 years to spend. So what else can I do? So with that being said, come back to the construction world, and I started traveling. I went to Vegas, Colorado. I ended up California before here, right? When I was in California, it got to a point where I was tapped out. Like, there's no more money I could make. I was in the top of the top leagues. The only way I could make more money on that case was coming back to school. I was like, well, 4 or 5 years in school or 10 years at the campus. And then that's when I started Googling, bro. I'm not going to lie. I started Googling, how can I make more money, this and that. And a video of Jim Rohn popped out in YouTube.
Wow. And how many years ago was that?
That was 3.5 years ago. A video of Jim Rohn came in YouTube, and I saw the video, and he says, the marketplace is going to pay you what you're worth. So I started, it was one of those things like you just see it once, and then you come back and forth, right? Watch a video here and there. And 2.5 years ago, that's when I really jumped in personal development. Really, really jumped in. Something I never did is like reading. That's how everything started from a book.
So I do have a question on your construction. So if they're in construction and want to get out of that culture, want to just start, but you also, you have a family to provide for. So you can't just up and quit without knowing where to go next. How did you take your mindset of the culture that you were in every single day and then apply what you were learning at night to the day shift? I mean, did it take a standard that you set for yourself and like, all right, I'm not going to cuss today, and I'm just going to set myself up. I'm going to stop drinking. Like, how did you start setting yourself up for success? But all the while, there's a lot of people that want to get from where they're at today to where they want to go, but they're so stuck in what they're doing today because, like you have a wife, you have 2 kids, and as a man, you have to provide. So how do you shift the culture and then learn to grow and take the risk and leaps that you had to take?
So that's a tough question. The good thing is, if you're actually listening to our podcast, you probably know what I'm about to say. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of discipline to know what you want to do, right? because it's not like they tell you, hey, you have to do this. Because I was one of those person when I started the personal development world, I came back to the guys that I used to work with. I had a crew at the time about like 15 or 18 guys. And I was very, very tight with like 4 of them. Like, talk to them all the time. We would do everything together. It was like a partner kind of deal. That's the guy coming in with me, right? And it was like 4 of us. Well, when I started reading, for example, the reading portion opened my mind immensely. So I was like, hey guys, check it out. You got to read this book. Like, your life is going to change. I feel like smarter when I read this book. I feel happier, and people don't want to change. So I think it's something that has to come within you first. Right?
Yeah, that was going back to the question, where did it start for us? And my story is a lot similar. Is you have to, I think there's a thing of, there's 3 ways people change. Number 1 is fear, the fear of losing something. Number 2 is pain. And the number 3 is choice. They choose to, even though that's probably the hardest. Because, for us, I'll start with me. It was probably the fear of losing it all. So it was a fear of change that no matter what, we had to figure it out. 2020, I came on board of Saddlebrook. I was 19 at the time. I didn't know anything. I knew how to be a rancher and a cattle farmer. I knew how to feed calves. I knew how to, saddle a horse every day. That's all I did. That's all I knew. And, over the years, we had learned from my dad of how to run a business, or how, kind of how he had run it. But in that year was a year of, it was very tough for our family because COVID had hit, and the cattle market had taken such a dip in the market that, the ranch was, days away from being foreclosed. So we were going through all of that when we first started Saddlebrook. And so I still remember 2020. It was late in the summertime. I was in the role, maybe 6 months, 8 months out of the year, and it was just me at the office. And I was 19 at the time. I was running, the whole company. Kyler, we had kind of split the task, and he was like, all right, I'm gonna take the sales and marketing, and we're gonna sell while we're on the road delivering all of these sheds and tiny homes. I had to do everything else. And so I was doing the purchasing. I was, like any other business owner that starts out, I think. I was doing the purchasing, the inventory. I was running to Home Depot 4 times a day. I was managing the crews, the work orders. And then the tricky part is I still had to manage payroll, manage our cash flow, accounts payable, accounts receivable, marketing. I was still running sales. And so we were trying to recruit, we were trying to build, we were trying to grow as a company. And so I still remember the day that my first mentor calls me. It was Friday night, close to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. It was only me in the office.
Wow.
Dead quiet. I was just sitting there working, and the office phone rings, which after 5 o'clock had, come to my cell phone. And I pick up, and turns out to be, a mentor that we now know as Stacy. And that conversation led for about an hour and a half. And I still remember the old office that we had. I was pacing up and down the front porch. It was outside. It was hot. And, she had called in. She had seen one of our dealer locations that we had at the time. And she was calling in for more information. And that conversation changed my life. It really changed the whole business growth as well.
So Stacy came in
as a lead.
As a lead. That's insane.
And, I was still doing my own sales as well. Not only did I want to sell her some tiny homes for, which we have, quite a few on her Epiphany Ranch now for, she's got the Love Cabin. She's got quite a few cabins that she does ministry through. And so the next weekend or 2 weeks, I had scheduled a day to go down there on a Saturday. And the reason I had to go travel on a Saturday, it was 3 hours away, is I was everything else all, in between, doing purchasing, managing, work orders, selling, marketing, websites, everything. Going to Home Depot. So the only day off that I had was on Saturdays. And at that time, the amount of processes and SOPs that we had were literally zero. So my main job on Saturdays was clean up behind everyone on Saturdays just so that we would have enough room to build the next Monday. And so every Saturday, I still remember me and my dad, we would be out there on Saturdays so mad that our guys didn't clean up behind themselves, but it was our fault. We had no leadership skills.
We didn't know nothing.
And so literally, Zeke, every Saturday, you would see me and my dad go out there with dumpsters and just start dragging stuff out and junking it. And that Saturday, I went down 3.5 hours, didn't know what to expect. And at that point, I was so hungry, I would drive anywhere. I would drive across the country. If you even hinted to me that you wanted to buy one of my homes or sheds, I'll come see you. We were hungry.
That's the power of being.
And that's where we first started. Is they had just started Fueled by Fire, which is now a large coaching company. And for the next 6 months, they didn't even have a program for what I needed or offered, or needed for as a business. And so for the next 6 months, I was probably her worst nightmare every time I called. And what had intrigued me up to that point, me and Kyler, we were always the entrepreneur spirit. We were always in personal growth. So the first person that had come up for us was Zig Ziglar. And on that call, she was like, I rode around with Zig Ziglar the last 15 years of his life.
Wow.
So that lit a bulb in my head. And I'm like, that's what I need. I said, I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you need, but I need a coach. And the reason why is I was drowning so far and over my head that I couldn't even see a way out.
That's crazy.
And so that's kind of where it started for me. It was, our family was going through nearly losing our ranch. Didn't know what we were doing in this brand new entity. We didn't have a name brand. It's a brand new company. Nobody trusts you in the marketplace. And so, and we had nobody to call. That is one of the worst sickening feelings as a business owner is you hit rock bottom. You have no way but up. And really, I think it's a God, I give him all the glory of what happened in COVID. When other businesses went out of business, we thrived. People started, buying backyard projects. They had all of the stimulus money. And so guess what? We were in the sweet spot.
That is awesome.
But that's how it first started. And then, the second thing I want to talk about is when you find a coach, and I wanted to go to you first. When you find a coach, one of the first things they're going to ask you, one of the first things that you have to ask yourself is, all right, what areas of my life or business do I need to coach in? What's the weakest area that right now, I have a saying, your weakest link is your strongest link. So how do you identify what your weakest area is, and then how do you go and find a coach for that area?
That's a great question. I think it's the hardest question out of all of them. Number one, because the first thing that coaches start doing, or actually start assessing, is where are you at in life, right? And these questions sometimes seem very dumb, in a sense, right? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And you don't even know, right? So when they ask you a question, what's your weakest thing? It's like, wow, I don't know. And like Stacy has the 7 F's, right? And you got to go on there and put number 3, number 5. You rank yourself from 1 to 10 where you're at in different areas in your life. And sometimes you open the book and you stay blank at the beginning. You don't know. You don't know until you actually start putting in the miles in there and actually start putting your head to think. And I think the biggest thing when it comes to that is you have to have your moments, your moments with God, and ask yourself where you're at. And that's how you really find out what's your weakest thing. For me, the weakest thing for me, even to now, is knowing that you have to be leveled in life with everything. Because we're so go, that you forget everything that's in the go portion of it. Your family, your loved ones, right? Sometimes we forget to eat, bro.
I haven't ate all day.
I'm telling you.
right? And I that is very true. And I always go back to the other thing that we as men, and I say this as men as well, this is how I think, is we never want to focus on our weakest link.
Never.
And that's the most because it's the most painful. And so what if you just gave it 10% more attention, right? And had, and I'll go to how many coaches how many mentors that we have, and the difference in each mentor of what they're there for. My thing is, if I have a weak manufacturing problem, and I go and say, okay, I have one mentor, and they're in sales. So I call the sales mentor up, and I'm like, hey, I have a problem in manufacturing. Where they're going to be like, well, my strong point is in sales. So it's like, create more sales, the problem's going to go away. But if you know manufacturing, and if you know accounting, and if all of that, what if you just doubled or 10x'd your problem? And so knowing what areas of your business, of your life, of your marriage is the weakest link, but then if you listen to someone else that has no idea how to fix that, all of a sudden you just 10x your problem overnight.
Yes.
Because if you're losing on one project and the sales coaches or sales mentor is going to say and go, hey, Zeke, I think you need to sell 10 more homes at that price. Well, if you're losing $10,000 a home, that's 100. Now you just 10x the problem. Now a $100,000 loss is way harder to get over than a $10,000 loss. And so that's why identifying the weakest area. And so when I first started, it was everything. And that's mostly every small business is, they're like, well, we don't have just one weak area. We have like everything's weak at this point. And so how I did it is I said, all right, what's the most important? Scale on a scale of 1 to 10. What's blinking red? So I'm like red, yellow, green. So I went and identified, all right, what's blinking red today? Number 1 red was my manufacturing process. Number 2 red was my sales and marketing process. We didn't have any. That was, your fulfillment and your sales, or in my opinion, is one of your biggest things you have to concentrate on. If you have great manufacturing but no sales, well, it doesn't matter. But if you have great sales and no manufacturing, then you lose sales as well. And so what I did to identify, and I still do it today, is red, yellow, green, is what is blinking red? What needs my attention today? How can I not only find the solution to my problem, but who can I find? And so when I started asking the question who, not how, I started to scale. Instead of figuring out, okay, I need to figure out my ERP systems, or I need to figure out global purchasing, or I need to figure out financing, or I need to figure out sales, or I need to figure out media and social media and what the algorithms are. I only have 24 hours in a day. And I think this is where most business owners get distracted, is they're like, well, I can do it cheaper.
I can do it better.
I can do it better than they can. Or I don't want to hire that person because they're going to cost me an extra $25 an hour. I can do it in half the time they can, and I'll still get it done. But what you don't know is the duplication process.
Yes.
If you have one person over here, it's the who, not the how, and all of a sudden you start 10xing everything. Now, it's very important figuring out who the best person is. Your right people, right seat is very important as well. The third thing I want to talk about today is wise counsel, and I think we've been talking a little bit about that, even going, for the last conversation we had, is wise counsel in all areas of business, running a business owner, or being being a father to a family, or being a wife. What wise counsel do you have around you in what specific areas, and what's the importance of knowing who to call at the right time?
I guess the number one thing is knowing where you're at and knowing where you go. So, for example, we travel a lot, we go everywhere, and you get to meet people from all over the place, right? And you want to see someone who has accomplished the thing you want, and you're going to ask that person, right, for help. So, for example, we got like Lacey, right? She knows a lot about one specific thing, and when we get stuck, when we need help, that's the person to call. I'm not going to call her for my marriage, or I'm not going to call her for different things, right? So I guess that's the number one thing is knowing who to call at all times, but it's a group of people. It's not like you're going to call one person for everything, right? Like our parents love us,
Right.
but they can't give us business advice. Come on.
Correct.
Right? Well, at least in my problem.
But if you have a sales coach, but you have an accounting problem,
Yes.
are they going to be able to help you?
Right? But it's like a business, right? If you don't have a sales, you don't have a product. If you don't have a product, you don't have sales.
And I think it's all of these things integrating with each other, whether it's a product-based company or service-based company. There's key elements that every business is the same.
Yes.
And I've talked to so many business owners, but Colton, you don't understand. My business is totally different than yours, and it doesn't apply to me. I'm like, yeah, but the principles are the same. In any business that I started, the principles are exactly the same, whether it's a service-based or a product-based. Now, I might have different processes on the back end, right? Or I might use a different marketing channel, but at the end of the day, you have to have the same principles.
Yes.
And so for Saddlebrook, I've got 8 wise counsel, and I don't talk to them all at the same time, but if I have a manufacturing problem, I call one person. Why? Well, they're a black belt in Six Sigma. They're in lean manufacturing. They know the 5S lean manufacturing laws. And I'm like, if I call anyone else about, hey, how do you become a lean manufacturing? Or for instance, our ERP system. If I have a problem with my ERP system, guess who I'm going to call? I'm going to call the mentor that we have for ERP softwares. How do we integrate this? How do we write code for that? This is a problem that we're trying to solve. Okay? If I have a legal problem, I'm not going to call my sales coach, or I'm not going to call my manufacturing mentor. Why? Because it's a totally different area that you need wise counsel on. And it's very important having those people. And you can start with one. I started with one. And if they didn't know the answer to my question, guess what successful people do have, Zeke? They have a connection. They have someone they know.
Yes.
And more times than none is I had called someone for advice, and they're like, hey, I can't help you, but this person over here, I know 9 times out of 10, I think he's going to be help solve your problem. And so what we do as business owners is we collaborate every day, all day. I have business people reaching out all the time, and they're like, hey, I have this problem. Do you know anyone? I'm like, absolutely. Let me put you in a text thread. They get on a phone call, and the beautiful thing about business owners and entrepreneurs that many people don't understand is we're there for each other.
100%.
I don't look at anyone as competition.
I think that's the hardest thing for people to understand, especially when they're growing up as like a new business or whatever, is I'm going to go out there and do it better than anyone else. And I heard this phrase one time, and I think this is very important, is this says there's a very thin line, and that thin line is you, right? There's going to be people underneath of that thin line, and there's going to be people above that thin line. And the people underneath the thin line is the people who are going to tell you can't do it, why are you doing it? There's going to be something better. There's people that are going to criticize you and going to tell you all the bad and the negatives, right? And then from that thin line up, there's 2 types of people. Just 2 types of people. There's one that's 100% going to ignore you, doesn't even want to talk to you, or they're going to grab your hand and take you up with them. So it's like, it's a 50-50 chance. And from that line underneath, you're done.
So in your experience, when you ask someone for help, what does that person want to see out of it?
They really want to see you succeed. They actually want to see you go forward. As long as you're doing what you're saying you're gonna do, and you're actually putting in the work to do it, they'll help you all the time.
And then it leads to my other question is, why wouldn't someone? And what I've seen is the reason why people say no to you is if they've tried to help you, and you're like, yeah, but. And that leads me to my next question is, what are you willing to give up in order to go to the next level? And that plays such a big part in it that I believe that if you reach out to someone and they're like, Colton, I believe you need to do step 1, step 2, and step 3. And you automatically put your defensive mode on and you're like, no, I'm good.
Their ego's
and then 3 months later, you call them back and be like, I still have the same problem. And they're like, so I gave you a list. Where are we at with the list of things that I gave you? Well, I tried that, but it didn't work. So one of my employees didn't like it, and they're like, their way's better. And they're like, okay. And the second thing, well, did you do the second thing? Well, no, I didn't want to do that. Then they're going to be like, you're just wasting my time, Colton.
Yes.
Or if you say, hey, mentor, these are the things that I've done. Here's the results. Here's, what I think we need to tweak. Where do we go next? What would you do next? And they're starting to see, your rhythm come and your success over success. And all of a sudden they're like, they're actually doing what I'm telling them to do. But it's a waste of time on their energy that if you call them with the same exact problem more than 3 times, they're going to be like, everything I tell you, it doesn't matter. So in your experience, what did you have to give up in order to get to the next level or where you're at today? And how do you go from the mindset of, I'm having to give something up that I don't want to?
I guess that would be the biggest thing. You can only give up something that you know it's worth it, right? So, for example, in my case, all my family and everybody that is my family, my dad, my mom, my sister, my cousin, everybody live at one town. If they go anywhere, 4-mile radius, it's because they're on a vacation. But that's about it. They come back to that town, right? And I had to give that up. I'm 16 hours away from my family. I've been 16 hours away from my family for the past 4 years. So I had to give that up. But then at the same time, it's like, do I want to stay and be where everybody else is at? I think that's the biggest thing I've given away. Other than that, micro things. For example, we used to party a lot. We used to drink in the weekends. We used to be around friends all the times, right? Having a lot of fun. And little by little, I gave up things. I mean, my afternoons were from chilling and just relaxing, watching a movie, to studying on YouTube, reading a book, doing something different, right? And everything started, a great book for everybody to read, Atomic Habits. Change micro things, and it will change your world.
And so how do people go from identifying the people, it all goes back to who you're around, the 5 most people that you're around.
Yes.
And I think it all starts with, your daily habits. What do you do on the weekends? How do you spend your money? If you, let's say you have a job and every weekend you go out and gamble. Well, that's a problem. Honestly, how do you say, all right, this weekend I'm not going to do it. This weekend, I know my best friend is going to call me and say, hey, Zeke, let's go to the casino. I think we're going to win this time. We're going to have a lot of fun. How do you learn to say no?
You got to learn how to see the big picture, see the future, right? Think about it this way. What you've been doing for the past 5 years is what brought you to being here today, right? So if you never change that, it's always going to be the same. So I started looking at my surroundings. In the construction world, I was one of the youngest guys. And I saw people mid-30s, 45, 50. I saw people at 70 years old still working out in the field with me, doing the exact same thing. Same thing. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Weekend will come around and do the same thing. I saw people making anywhere from $15 an hour to making $60, $80 an hour, doing the exact same thing. Just different areas, right? When I was in Arizona, the person framing was making $15 an hour. When I was in California, the person framing was making $60 an hour. And guess what they did that weekend? They both drank. They both spent their money. Monday came around and they didn't have money. So that's when I started analyzing, coming back to your question, that's where I started analyzing. I was like, all right, I'm 20, 22 years old at this point in time. I really don't want to be 65 and be in the same spot.
And drink, I call it drinking your life away. I think everybody wants to make something with their life. They just don't know how, because every generation's done this exact same thing. So no one has the expertise. And I think we're in a digital age now that if you didn't want to pay for any mentors, you wouldn't have to.
You don't?
it's so much of it is free on YouTube. But it's taking the habit of going in there and just watching, taking notes.
Yes.
Acting on the action items.
That was the biggest thing. From being a very spectator to actually being a student. Right?
Wow.
Everybody has access to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all this. TikTok, bro. 90 seconds videos. Max. And you can learn a life lesson on there. But what do people go in there and just scroll?
Me and Kyler, I should start sending you stuff. Like, we get our brightest ideas scrolling on TikTok, and I'm like, had another TikTok come in from Kyler, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, it's Dan Martell about this, or it's so-and-so teaching, it's Cody Sanchez teaching about how to buy businesses, and I'm like, I could do that in my case. I'm like, let's do it. And I think you've known me and Kyler long enough, and it's sometimes, I'm having to learn. The bigger the big business gets, I can't go and say, all right, I'm going to do a 90-degree shift today and then do another 90-degree shift tomorrow. Like, it's 1% increments. So I'm having to learn. You can't, it takes a long time to turn a ship around, but it's what do you do every single day to start, to keep turning? And, Walmart's, I'm very close to one of Walmart's top executives that retired. And the biggest thing that he told me, Zeke, was Walmart has one slogan. It's change every day.
Wow.
And so I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And they're like, every single day, something about the business changes. But I'm like, why? Because if we're responding in real-time markets, and real-time problems, that we have a culture that change every day. And they've been doing it for 40 plus, 50 plus years. Every single day.
Look at where Walmart's at.
And look at where Walmart's at. They're in probably every country on the continent.
Now that you bring that up, that's funny. We went to a little Mexican store literally yesterday. And the guy's like, cash only. Like, what do you mean cash only? Like, you don't accept credit cards? He's like, nope. And this African American came in and broke into my store and just ripped out the cables and this and that. He's telling me all the story, right? And I was like, so how long ago was that? I was thinking last week or something.
Yeah.
He's like 3 years ago.
So how much sales in 3 years did he lose?
And that's exactly, they came back to that point. I was like, so you're telling me that you prefer be over here crying that that someone stole it, like came in and broke into your store 3 years ago, then going to even Zelle, like get Zelle, get Venmo, get PayPal, I don't know, something where you could actually scan a QR code.
Square gives $100 and something a portal away.
It's crazy. People don't want to change. But look at Walmart. Global.
But even, the process of, a year ago you would see them only doing self-checkout. And they got rid of all of their cashiers.
Mm-hmm.
But now they did a study. They were losing so much in theft that, guess what? Now the cashiers are back. So they're always testing new things, but if it didn't work, let's go back to what worked and do maybe 25% or 50%.
Yes. That's what data is so important.
It is. And if you guys, we're going to pause right here. If you guys can follow us, share with anyone that this would be valuable. This is not, we don't get paid to do this. We depend on organic traffic that share, like, subscribe. It all helps us with what we're trying to do. And I'll go to our last question is, how can you find your first mentor?
It's an easy question and it's a hard question. If you really want to get started, go on YouTube.
Simple as that.
Simple as that. Open up your YouTube. I started with TED Talks. Love TED Talks. Because you actually get super, the top of the world communicators on TED Talks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where I started. I mean, a 15-minute video, I would convert it to a 2-hour because I would pause it, play, notes, back and forth, right? And then assess yourself. Where you at? What's your weakest point? Think that's where everything starts. Wherever you're ranking at number 1, number 2, look at that more in detail and see why, right? And then you can find, just Google something in that area. Books are a great way to start. And then start making moves, right? How'd you find your first mentor?
It was back, we spent, trust me, it was not cheap, but, and I go back to the three reasons why people change is, fear of losing something, pain, or they just choose. And it was more of a fear and a pain for me I'm like, all right, I'm living in this every day. I don't know how to get out. And, I call it the definition of insanity. It's doing something every single day, over and over again. And it's the definition of insanity. How many people are still doing the exact same thing, like your Mexican store that you went into, doing the exact same thing every day, grumbling about it. He's in constant pain about this problem that his credit card processor got ripped out, but he's not willing to change. He's not willing to go out and look and say, okay, there's actually a different payment processor that I can use.
Yes.
And it's, you can find some that are free.
Yes.
And so it all started with what was my biggest pain. And, I had a fear of losing everything because we were in the process of losing our rent, our house. I was still living with my parents, so that meant I would have to go find or rent something. I had never rented anything in my entire life. I had never bought anything in my entire life. And so I'm like, I have to do something. I have to get out of this constant pain that we're in and the fear of losing everything. That's how I found my first one. And secondly, of where we're at today, it was always through other business people that said, I think this guy or I think this woman can help you. Let me connect you.
Connections.
It's all about connecting the dots. And that's, going back to knowing the right people of if you don't know someone that can help you, 9 times out of 10, you probably have someone in your phone that knows somebody that can help you, that would be more than happy to help you. And so that's where I will leave this podcast off is it doesn't take 10,000. It doesn't take 100,000. It doesn't take $1 million. You can change your life by literally going on YouTube and searching what your pain point is. 9 times out of 10, a person in that area will start popping up. You'll start seeing in your feeds and you start picking them. They'll have a program that you can jump into if you want. The other thing that I'll leave you with is let's say you go to monthly subscription to watch their courses. I've watched so many people spend their money on coaching, and then guess what happens? They start diving in, they're starting doing the work, and then they get busy. Yes. Then they're like, well, I'll do it tomorrow. Then a month passes. Then 6 months pass. They look up and they're like, Colton, 6 months ago I paid for this program and it didn't work. I'm like, why didn't it work? Well, I didn't, 2 months I was watching videos every day and then I just got tired of it and I didn't watch anything anymore. Well, how do you expect growth if you're not every single day intentional with your time of learning every day? And that's what I'll leave you with, is be intentional. It's a definition of insanity. If you do something every single day, day after day, it's going to drive you crazy. And people are going to call you insane, and that's what I think you are.
Yeah.
Because you're not willing to change. And so I'll leave you with that. Thank you, Zeke, for coming on. I think it was a good podcast.
Appreciate it.
Great podcast. I always get inspired by what we're doing. And not only seeing what we're doing is where we were versus where we are today versus where we'll be in 12 months.
100%.
That is the most inspiring thing about us is we hold each other so accountable at the level to where it's a lot of pressure.
Yes.
But it's just like manufacturing a diamond. A diamond doesn't get cut until it's under extreme pressure that people change.
And that's for me. Yeah.
And so thank you guys. If you can subscribe our podcast, share it with someone that you feel needs to hear this podcast, or if you have any questions that you need to ask me and Zeke, we'll be happy to get on a call, get on text, comment below. See you guys in the next one. Thank you guys.
Have a good day.
God, I'm still counting my blessings. Oh, that you've done in my life.